What if I told you there are people who've walked out of jungles, ice storms, kidnapping holes, and war zones when they weren't supposed to? These aren't movie plots, these are real. And the way they survived? Unbelievable. Stay till the end, because one of these stories will shake your entire faith in what humans are capable of enduring. In May 2003, 24-year-old Cara Montero and her older brother, Felix Montero, set off for a hike through Bolivia's Madidi National Park, one of the most remote and dangerous rainforests on Earth. Locals called it the Green Coffin. The siblings had grown up in La Paz and wanted one last adventure before Felix left for a job in Brazil. What they didn't know, what no travel book ever truly captured, was that Madidi didn't just challenge explorers. It erased them. Their guide, a man named Diego, took them deep into the forest over 2 days, showing them ancient medicinal trees, snake nests, and the eerie silence that falls when jaguars stalk nearby. On the third morning, a freak landslide tore through the slope where they had made camp. The ground gave way, trees cracked like bones, and when the dust settled, Diego was gone, buried somewhere under earth and boulders. Felix was bleeding from a head wound. Cara had twisted her ankle. Their packs were destroyed. No compass, no maps, no signal. They were alone in a forest that didn't forgive mistakes. Felix tried to stay calm. They had a single bottle of iodine, a tiny sharp object, and what remained of a crushed energy bar. They decided to follow the river downhill, hoping it would lead to a village or at least a familiar trail. But by sunset, the forest changed, pulsed. Strange noises surrounded them. Whistles, cackles, and the distant guttural growls of unseen predators. The air grew thicker, the insects more aggressive. Something out there was watching. By day 2, Felix had a fever. His wound was turning green. Cara foraged mushrooms and leaves she thought might help, but they burned Felix's throat. He started speaking nonsense about shadows in the trees and people whispering in the leaves. On the third night, she woke to him standing knee-deep in the river, arms outstretched, speaking to someone who wasn't there. When she tried to pull him back, he pushed her. He didn't recognize her anymore. On day 4, he was gone. Cara followed his tracks for miles, her injured ankle swelling with every step. The path ended near an area filled with disturbed earth and claw marks along the bark. Blood dotted the foliage. She screamed for him until her throat bled. Nothing answered, just the forest breathing. She wanted to die, but hunger is a cruel motivator. She chewed on bark, caught a frog with her bare hands and gagged it down raw. She wrapped her ankle with vine. She drank from muddy puddles and let leeches feed on her arms, not because she didn't notice, but because it didn't matter anymore. On the 7th day, her body collapsed near a shallow creek. She was done. The sun was setting, birds were silent, and she could hear footsteps. Not animal, not beast, but boots. A group of Quechua hunters found her. They had seen smoke rising where the landslide occurred and came looking days later. They carried her out wrapped in banana leaves like a relic. Cara Montero survived 192 hours in the jungle. Felix's body was never recovered. When she returned to civilization, her skin was torn, her muscles atrophied, her eyes sunken, but she was alive. She refused all interviews for years. It wasn't until 2018 that she finally told her story, her voice steady, her eyes far away. She said the forest didn't try to unalive her, tried to keep her. In the heart of Siberia, the cold doesn't unalive you instantly. It lingers. In February 1998, 31-year-old Roman Balaikov was on a solo winter expedition meant to test survival gear for a Moscow-based outdoor brand. He had done this dozens of times, documented them, lectured about them, but this journey would become a different kind of lesson. He had set up camp near Lake Baikal, on a flat stretch of frozen land he'd scouted in satellite images. The plan was simple: spend 7 days alone, record wind speeds, thermal efficiency, and log food and energy use. What he hadn't accounted for was the ice storm that arrived on the second night. It swept across the lake like a living blade, snapping his tent ropes and launching his gear bag into the wind. By the time Roman managed to secure shelter, he had lost his GPS, food supplies, and the heat source he'd rigged. He huddled into the partial tent frame, layering every fabric he could find, clutching hand warmers that were already cooling. By the 4th hour, the cold had crept into his bones. He screamed just to feel his voice. His fingers had gone black. When he tried to move, they cracked and bled. He tore his thermal mat into strips and used pieces of wire from his broken stove to hold it together like armor. He wrapped his feet in socks soaked in alcohol, not for warmth, but to numb the pain. He dragged himself to a frozen log he remembered passing earlier and dug beneath it with his elbow until he found dry moss. He set it ablaze using flint, and for 1 hour he had fire. It was the only hour of heat he'd know. On the 3rd night, wolves came. They didn't harm. They circled. Roman wrote in his notebook, later recovered, that their eyes looked more human than beast. They stayed through the night, just outside the flames' reach, howling like mourners at a funeral. On day 5, Roman stopped writing. His journal ends mid-sentence. I see them watching again from... He was found on day 9, unconscious, teeth clenched around the zipper of his jacket. He'd chewed off part of his tongue in a feverish state. 3 of his fingers were amputated. His left foot lost all 5 toes. But Roman Balaikov recovered. He later turned his story into a textbook on frostbite survival and a documentary titled Cold Doesn't Whisper, It Screams. But perhaps no story of insane survival is as cruel and haunting as what happened to 20-year-old Mia Callahan in September 2007. Mia had been working part-time as a farmhand in rural Montana. She was quiet, bright, obsessed with astronomy. She'd often spend her nights watching stars from the rooftop of the barn. One evening, she didn't come down. The owner assumed she fell asleep. By morning, she was gone. At first, police thought she'd wandered off, or left voluntarily. But then her journal was found, pages torn out, the last entry reading, I think someone is watching me from the woods. A search team combed the nearby forest. Nothing. Mia had been abducted by a man named Kent Rowley, a recluse who lived off-grid and had been spotted occasionally at the gas station, muttering about the cleansing of sin. He'd seen Mia once. That was all it took. He kept her in a hole, literally, a 4-foot-wide underground chamber dug beneath a shed on his property. No lights, no toilet, just a bucket, chains, and silence. Mia was kept there for 34 days. She marked time by scratching notches into the wall with a rock. She learned to sleep standing. She counted minutes in her head to stay sane. And she listened. Every morning, Rowley would come and talk, just talk, about religion, about cleansing, about purification. He never touched her, never fed her more than stale bread and water. But he would read verses out loud and ask her if she was clean enough to be seen. On day 33, a dog changed everything. A rescue dog from a nearby town had broken from its leash and wandered into the woods. The searchers followed, found strange disturbed dirt near Rowley's shed. Then they heard the muffled sound. Not a scream, not even a cry, just movement. When they opened the trapdoor, Mia was unrecognizable. Pale, hair matted, weighing just 89 pounds. She didn't speak for 3 days. When she finally did, her first word was sky. Kent Rowley was arrested. He claimed she was sent to him by God. He was deemed unfit for trial and institutionalized. Mia Callahan never returned to Montana. She moved to New York, changed her name, and now teaches trauma writing workshops. She rarely tells her story, but when she does, she says she survived because she refused to give him the one thing he wanted, to break her. And then there's the story that makes even the most hardened survivalists fall silent. The one that begins not in the jungle, not at sea, but in a hospital basement in Chechnya during the height of the 1999 war. Sergei Davidov was a nurse, 26 years old. He worked at a trauma clinic near Grozny. When airstrikes hit, the hospital flooded with the wounded. One day, sirens screamed too late. A missile crashed into the east wing, crumbling half the building. Sergei was on the lower level when the blast trapped him behind steel debris. Alone. No phone. No way to signal. Just concrete and darkness. He waited for someone to find him. They didn't. The rest of the building was evacuated. It was presumed that everyone in that section had died. Sergei wasn't dead, but he would wish he was. He survived on 4 fluids bags that had fallen off supply shelves. He licked condensation from pipes, ate gauze soaked in glucose, slept on discarded linens. Days blurred. His beard grew, his fingers bruised from clawing walls. On day 16, rats came. He didn't chase them off. He listened, followed their scurrying. They knew where openings were. Eventually, he found one, a hole behind a fractured panel. Too small to escape through, but enough to shout into. It still took 7 more days before anyone heard him. On day 23, a janitor heard what he thought was wind. It wasn't. It was Sergei whispering for help. When they dug him out, Sergei couldn't stand, couldn't cry, couldn't feel, but he was alive. And when asked how he didn't lose his mind, he simply said, "I counted the seconds between my own breaths. I gave them names. I gave them hope. These are not just flukes of survival. They are the edge of humanity's will, the horrifying, breathtaking boundary between life and the abyss." These people didn't just escape death. They stared it in the face and said, "Not yet." And sometimes death listened. Which story left you speechless? Was it the forest that tried to keep Kara? The wolves that watched Roman? Mia's silent defiance underground? Or Sergei naming the seconds between his breaths? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in their place? And if stories like these keep you wide awake at night, subscribe. There's more Where That Came From.